Schopenhauer didn't develop his ideas in a library. He developed them by watching people, real people, around him, making the same mistake over and over again. And the place where he saw it most clearly wasn't a battlefield. It was a university. Berlin. Early 1800s. The academic world at that time had a king. His name was Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was the most celebrated philosopher in Europe. Professors quoted him like scripture. Students worshipped him like a prophet. Government officials used his ideas to justify state power. To disagree with Hegel was to end your career before it started. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He called Hegel's philosophy deliberately obscure, built to confuse, built to impress, not built to reveal truth. But no one wanted to hear that, because Hegel wasn't just a philosopher anymore. He had become an identity. To be a Hegelian was to belong to something powerful, something prestigious, something safe. And Schopenhauer made a decision that would cost him everything. He scheduled his lectures at the exact same hour as Hegel's. He believed the truth would win. He believed students would choose clarity over prestige. He was wrong. His lecture hall sat almost empty. Hegel's overflowed. Schopenhauer watched capable, intelligent men choose comfort over honest thinking. And that's when something shifted in him. He stopped asking why people followed blindly. He started asking something far more dangerous. What does blind loyalty actually do to the mind of the person giving it? The answer he found wasn't what anyone expected. Schopenhauer didn't react with anger. He reacted with observation. He started studying the men around Hegel. Not Hegel himself, but his followers. And what he noticed was methodical, almost clinical. The most devoted followers were never the weakest men in the room. They were often the brightest. Young academics with sharp minds, men who had shown real promise early in their careers, men who were fully capable of original thought. But somewhere along the way, they had made a trade. They exchanged their own judgment for the security of belonging to something larger. And once that trade was made, it was almost impossible to reverse. Schopenhauer wrote about this in a way that still feels uncomfortable to read today. He said the moment a man decides that his group cannot be wrong, he has effectively stopped thinking, not slowed down, not become lazy, stopped, because every new piece of information no longer enters his mind as a question. It enters as a threat. Anything that challenges the group gets rejected automatically, not evaluated, not examined, rejected. And here is where it gets deeply unsettling. The man doesn't know this is happening. He genuinely believes he is still thinking freely. He believes his loyalty is a sign of wisdom, a sign of discernment. He believes he has simply found something worth defending. But Schopenhauer saw something those men couldn't see themselves. Their identity and their beliefs had become the same thing. And when that happens, attacking the belief feels exactly like attacking the person. That distinction, that invisible line, is where the real destruction begins. And Schopenhauer had only just started uncovering how deep it goes. There's a moment Schopenhauer documented that most people overlook. It happened quietly, without drama, without a single confrontation. One of Hegel's most promising students, a young academic named Karl, had privately begun questioning Hegel's framework. Not publicly, not loudly, just internally. He had read something that contradicted a core idea he had built his entire thesis around. And instead of following that contradiction, instead of pulling that thread, he buried it. He told himself it wasn't important. He told himself he had misunderstood. He restructured his thinking until the contradiction disappeared. Schopenhauer had seen this exact pattern before. He called it intellectual self-betrayal. The moment when a man knowingly ignores his own honest conclusion to protect something he is emotionally attached to. And here is the part that changes everything. Karl didn't just move on. He became more vocal in his defense of Hegel, more aggressive, more certain, as if burying that private doubt required him to perform louder belief on the outside. Schopenhauer recognized this immediately. He wrote that extreme public loyalty is almost always the symptom of private doubt that was never allowed to breathe. The louder the devotion, the more something has been suppressed underneath it. That idea sat quietly in his notebooks for years, but then something happened that turned his private observation into a public crisis. A senior academic, respected, decorated, deeply embedded in Hegel's circle, made a discovery, a real one, something that directly contradicted everything the group had built its reputation on. And what he did next was the most revealing moment Schopenhauer ever witnessed. He didn't speak, and that silence destroyed him completely. His name was Friedrich Richter, a senior lecturer at Berlin, 20 years of academic work behind him, a man who had built everything inside Hegel's intellectual world. He wasn't a radical, he wasn't a rebel, he was a loyalist, and that's exactly what made what happened to him so difficult to watch. Richter had been working on a paper about the nature of human will. Deep into his research, he encountered a body of work that Hegel's framework couldn't explain. Not partially, not on the edges, at the core. He spent 3 months checking his own findings, reading, rereading, testing every angle. The conclusion kept coming back the same. A foundational assumption that the entire Berlin academic circle had been operating on for over a decade was wrong. Richter knew what this meant. If he published, he would be finished, not because the evidence was weak, but because the evidence was strong enough to threaten the careers of men far more powerful than him. So he made a calculation. He told himself he would wait, find a better moment, present it carefully, protect himself first. Weeks passed, then months. The paper stayed locked in his desk, and something strange began happening to Richter. The longer he stayed silent, the more he started doubting his own findings, not because new evidence emerged, but because the silence itself had begun rewriting his memory. Schopenhauer had a name for this. He called it the corruption of prolonged loyalty. The mind, desperate to resolve the tension between what a man knows and what he is willing to say, begins quietly editing the truth until the tension disappears. Richter didn't just stay silent. He eventually published a paper defending the exact assumption he had privately proven wrong. He cited his own buried research and inverted its conclusions. When Schopenhauer heard this, he didn't express surprise. He said only one thing. He didn't lose his courage. He lost himself. And that is the final stage of blind loyalty that almost no one talks about. What it costs you isn't your reputation. It costs you your ability to trust your own mind. Richter never recovered, not professionally, not personally. He spent the remaining years of his career defending a position he knew was false, building argument after argument on a foundation he himself had cracked open and then quietly sealed back shut. The men around him never knew. They cited his work. They praised his consistency. They held him up as an example of serious, committed scholarship. And every single compliment made it worse, because now, walking away meant confessing not just the original silence, but everything built on top of it. The lie had compounded, and Schopenhauer watched this with something closer to grief than satisfaction, because he understood something that Richter never fully faced. The tragedy wasn't the wasted career. The tragedy was that Richter had been capable of something real. He had found something true, and he had traded it, not for money, not for fame, but simply to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. Schopenhauer wrote his most important warning directly from observing men like Richter. He said, "The most dangerous loyalty is not loyalty to a bad leader or a corrupt institution. It is loyalty to the version of yourself that has already committed, because that loyalty asks you to keep paying a price long after the original reason has disappeared, and most men pay it quietly, completely, until there is nothing left to protect." The lesson Schopenhauer left behind isn't complicated. Your thinking is the only thing that is entirely yours. The moment you hand that over to a group, a leader, an institution, you don't just lose your opinion, you lose the mechanism that allows you to find your way back. Richter knew the truth. He chose comfort instead, and he spent 20 years becoming a stranger to himself. That is what blind loyalty actually costs. Not your position, not your reputation, your mind. If this made you think differently about where your own loyalty ends and your honest judgment begins, you already know what to do.